Guess who got brands talking? Brandlive.co.za.
Good morning to all our listeners out there. Welcome to the Monday afternoon edition of Breaking the Chains Recovery Radio, the hottest show on air where we discuss addiction, we discuss recovery, and we discuss all the issues relating to these two topics, what's working, what could be better, what's happening out there, and we broadcast a message of hope that recovery is possible. This afternoon, we got a really cool show, so we're going to get straight into it. We're going to be speaking about government addiction treatment facilities, what's being provided, what's working, what's not working, and we have a guest in studio who's just come out of a government facility who's going to talk a bit about what he got from the facility, the difficulties, and we pose the question, does it have to be that difficult to recover? I'm here with my good friend, co-host, mentor, and sponsor, Uncle Manny. Good Monday morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning, Maren. Good morning to our listeners. Good morning, Grant. You know, the topic for this morning, to give it some credence, is we live in a country that is riddled with huge numbers of addicts. And we live in a country with a history of neglect for certain vulnerable sectors of our nation, you know. And the one thing I've always been passionate about is this country, and now I found a new passion, and that is for the addict. So whenever an addict recovers, and we believe any addict can recover if he can be given the proper treatment and the proper program and the proper support, you know. And sometimes it's difficult. However, there are victories in that war against drugs, which we've lost. We've got to understand we've lost the war.
But we've won certain battles.
We win in the battles, you know, and that's important. And it's very easy for people to blame government. But a lot of what we have is beyond government's control. I believe it's a civic duty. It's a civil society problem. And I know government tries, and maybe they don't do enough, but that's an opinion that a lot of people might hold.
Mm-hmm.
But with us this morning, we have a young man, you know, who through a very difficult journey is sitting with us in the studio, and he's clean. So let's hand over to Grant, and just so he can introduce himself and tell us how he's feeling, and give us a bit of your journey, Grant.
Morning, Warren. Morning, Manny.
Morning.
Listeners. I like what you said there about civic duty. Just want to touch on that. We can look at our government and go, you know, they didn't provide this, they're not doing this. But at the end of the day, it is up to us to make the difference. Us as addicts. Just briefly, to go back a bit, getting into the institution itself was a bit of a battle. The whole admission process, I had a few people helping me out through it. It could have been a lot smoother. Once I had gotten into it, it was detox, a basic detox. Gave me methadone and so on, and then the program started. It was a struggle to stay in recovery, to stay focused on recovery in an institution like that was a difficult process. I found that I had to do a lot of 12-step work.
For the listeners out there, 12-step work?
I had to help the fellow addict to stay clean. I had to try and carry a message of the knowledge I had gathered through the fellowship and through my time in the rooms of the fellowship to stay clean. Otherwise, just going backwards a bit, I've done 10 treatment centers, all private treatment centers. A lot of them the most exclusive in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up now on the last one at the end of the road, being in a government institution.
So Grant, you speak about having to have done a lot of 12th step work, helping the fellow addicts in the rehab. You know, I know from my experience that's the biggest tool, the biggest rocket, the biggest piece of ammunition I have against my own disease. However, how many people were in the facility with you, if I may?
There were 200 at any given time.
Other than yourself being a fellow resident or a fellow patient at the facility, what is provided by the facility in terms of counseling, in terms of therapy, and in terms of getting a person to a place of recovery at these facilities? I don't know if you want to add on to that, Uncle Manny.
Okay, for me, and I got to stress this, is that addicts are not animals. Firstly. Secondly, if I know a number of addicts that have come out and through 12-step work have saved many, many families and many, many communities. And I think that's the best weapon that we have in the fight against war.
Is our experience.
Is our experience and our willingness to do service and to take the message of recovery into our communities and into homes, And I think God's saving grace was the fact that he's been exposed to that fellowship.
Yes.
Now, I do know from my own experience that the fellowship and the program aren't really imperatives as far as many facilities are concerned. And that's worrying because it's become the most successful 12-step program in the world. For argument's sake, in Canada, they run the 12-step program. The laws allow that the process becomes a little bit easier for addicts to get in, and government pays for that rehab. But there's a catch. You got to be there for 1 year. So they give you ample time, and the environment is enabled where they don't take in more than 50 at a time into one facility. And I believe even at 50, you're going to need 2 or 3 counselors, and obviously a house father, a house mother, where the environment is one of love, tolerance, and almost a family setting or a communal setting, so that can prepare you for integration back into society. Now, but we're going to let Grant tell us about the numbers and your experience. I mean, it can't be that. I'm not saying it was good, but I'm saying it can't be that bad simply because you clean. So the result is what we achieved,
Yes. So my experience in it okay, so for me, the 200 people that were there, I was very fortunate because I attached myself to a recovering addict that works there. He helped me through a lot of my process. I used the tools that were available, and he was one of them. The other tools that are available are your social workers. They are not recovering addicts. I personally felt that the message that they gave in groups, etc., was warped. It was simple thing is, to me, the alcohol is a relapse. Often the message that is passed on in the groups is alcohol leads to a relapse.
So there's a definition between alcohol and other drugs that they're...
Absolutely, which a lot of the guys afterwards would say to me, I'm going to drink when I leave. And I cringed because I know what path that takes me. And I know what path it'll take them. So there are things that need to be ironed out. The living environment is hard inside there. It's difficult. There's a lot of prison rules that go on. The food is so difficult to stomach, to say the least. And the one-on-one care is almost non-existent, like I mentioned. It's difficult for 1 or 2 people who really have the guy's interest at heart to take it upon themselves and look after 200 people at a time.
So what you're saying is there are staff, but the staff are not equipped to deal with
Correct.
the patients, and those that are, there's not enough of them.
Absolutely. The staff, from my experience, the staff that care and the staff with the expertise that this is the one I'm particularly talking about, that needed to be tripled or quadrupled for any sort of, to increase any success rate. The guys that leave there, and this is from what I witnessed, the guys that leave there, they walk out with very little ammunition, very little tools to work with, and they're walking out onto the street back to the same old life. Manny mentioned what the Canadian government is doing, and they're empowering the guys. They setting up opportunities once they leave, that things are, they have a path. Quite often the guys are leaving into the same situation that they came in with.
And as you mentioned, with prison rules and that, I think a lot of addicts come from a life of prison and gangsterism, and coming into a treatment facility and being allowed to continue that same way of life, that same philosophy inside there. You know, there's an old saying that goes, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
You know, for me, there's a line in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that says we are ill-disciplined, so we allow God to discipline us. Now, I can tell you from my layman's experience, you know, is that there's most probably a large bill that government picks up the tab for. Secondly, I don't believe there's a lot of monitoring. Thirdly,
Well,
as
200 people to one recovering addict, it's
very difficult.
It's very difficult.
Thirdly, we can't take away from the fact that there's a start. But from what we should understand is that if you're investing in addicts, then we need to watch that investment. We need to nurture that investment. We need to ensure that investment results in value for government, value for our people, value for the addict, you know. And I understand. I've been to some of these facilities to go and talk and to see where we can add value, you know. And at times we need to look at what we're doing, because what we do is not as important as how we do it. That's a philosophy that I got out of the program of recovery, you know. So as much as things are being done, we must be careful not to become human doings and rather stick to being human beings. So as much as I'm happy you clean and I'm happy you sober, we have to always look at the success rate, especially when there's huge investment. At a time in this country, I believe that the drug problem has the ability to destabilize this country. If every Nyaupe addict out there steals 1 meter of cable, that's
Yes.
goodbye to Eskom,
Yes.
you know. And that is exactly what is happening. And you know, it's very difficult for government, because on the one end, they're trying to make things work, and on the other end, civil society is pulling it down and breaking it down. So part of recovery and part of the journey of recovery is to add value, to create unity, and to create an environment of love, tolerance, and acceptance, which is so needed given the history of our country. How did you feel? And I know you come maybe from a point of privilege, and then there's other guys that come from a point of poverty. So we got to always look at the dynamics of both those ends of the scale. We're going to take in a break now.
Yeah, we're going to go to a quick ad break. I think when we come back, let's talk a bit about exactly that, the guys from both ends of the scale. And as we said before the show, where do we meet together as human beings in unity for a common solution that's going to not only invest in the addict, but be a investment in society itself at the end of the day. You're listening to Breaking the Chains Recovery Radio. We'll be right back.
You're listening to brandlive.co.za.
Have you ever thought about the power of social media? Social media has the power to make your business grow. Grow! Yeah. Why don't you let us manage your social media? Because our business is to see your business grow. Visit us at www.bstownmedia.co.za.
Whether you're an athlete or just going about your day-to-day business, use Turbo Freeze on the go for any pain relief or inflammation. It's the #1 pain relief formula. To find out more, log on to our website www.turbofreeze.co.za.
Hey Bonang, how are you?
Hi Tuli, look so beautiful. Hey, long time no see. What happened to your skin, by the way? The last time I saw you, you had a lot of blemishes and breakouts. It was so terrible, man.
Wow, thanks for that, Bonang. Luckily, I discovered DMK. Have you heard of DMK?
DMK? Who are they?
DMK is a paramedical skincare brand that specializes in all skin conditions. Would you like their number?
Yes, please.
I know you're not good at numbers, so let me give you their website address because your skin looks terrible. It's www.dmkskincare.co.za.
Harnessing the power of talk radio. Brandlive.co.za.
We're back. And we're in the studio. Warren, my co-host, and a friend I just met this morning, Grant. But you know, addicts, we like connected. We got like our own, I won't call it Bluetooth, you know?
Secret society.
Secret society where we just connect, you know?
Yeah.
And he's looking good. How many days were you in the facility, Grant?
41 in total. It's a 42-day program. I got released a day early due to admin reasons.
Okay, so not too bad. There's some facilities, they charge you arm and a leg and they keep you for 21 days.
Mhm.
You know?
Correct. Yeah.
So we're talking about this privilege and this poverty. I always look at it. I call them trust fund junkies, and we call the guys the gifts of desperation. Guys, they got no other options, you know.
Mhm.
Now, and that's the history of our society. That's what we've inherited, and obviously we want to develop a new society, and we want to develop new values and new morals and that kind of thing. So how do we marry the two? So you got a guy that grew up in the dusty streets of, let's say for argument's sake, Katlehong. You know, and you got a kid that grew up in
Lone Hill.
in Lone Hill, you know. So, and they both end up alone on a hill, you know. Yeah, you know. And obviously there were differentiations in education.
Mm.
There were differentiations in opportunities. But drugs is such a powerful tool, they end up in exactly the same spot,
Mhm.
Yeah.
you know. Then to get them both to a certain level of humanity and of adding value, we should try to balance what any addict gets out there. Now, I believe that if disabled people want a ramp in a shopping mall, they get the ramp in the shopping mall. Not so with addicts. Addicts have very little say into what legislation says. Has very little say when you talk to doctors or when you talk to a psychologist. Now, part of the problem for me, there's spinners for both. Because the guy from Katlehong, hopefully, is never going to go to a rehab where they put him on Epilim,
Mm.
you know,
Where they medicate him.
where they
for his-
medicate him for his
Sure.
addiction. And that's a show all on its own. That's a show all on its own, you know. Psychiatric medication for addicts.
replacing one drug
But then
with a legal
again,
one.
taking a guy from Lone Hill
Mhm.
and putting him into the ghetto can be equally traumatic.
Mm.
And
you know,
equally beneficial as well in
and
terms
equally
of the
beneficial
humility
as
that
well.
comes from it.
So we need to find that balance. That's my view.
You know, the way I look at it, Uncle Manny, and Grant, I don't know if you'll agree with me. So that guy you spoke about from Katlehong, he goes into the facility, and Grant, you from Lone Hill, you go into the facility. Now, the big benefit, I think, which you've discussed with us of going into a government facility was there was humility. There was
gratitude. Yeah.
that humility through humiliation, and from that was born a lot of gratitude. But you walked into the facility, as you said, you had a lot of prior knowledge of the program, and you started applying that to help guys, which is what the program's all about in essence. What about that guy from Katlehong who walks into the facility? He has absolutely no prior knowledge of recovery, of the 12 steps, of the program. And for him, it's not a humbling experience. For him, he's coming from a shack or he's coming from the streets. And for him, just to have a plate of food 3 times a day, it's one of the first times in his life that he's actually eating a good meal for the first time. And what are these guys after 42 or 41 days? What are they walking away with? What are they being taught? And what more could be taught? What's the missing link? For you, what do you believe the missing link is, and the element of treatment that's not being emphasized enough in these facilities? I know at Breaking the Chains it's a spiritual thing. We focus a lot on spirituality, not religion, 12 steps, reintegration, becoming a value-adding member of society. Talk a bit about the program at the government facility you were at.
Well, just to go back to what Manny was touching on, I think what's necessary is balance. There's balance between the government and private institutions. I've been, like I mentioned, I've been to the best in the country, the most expensive, and I've been to where I was now, which was government institute. And there's perhaps that is catered for by certain institutions, but there's a balance that's required. If you could meet in between
a middle ground.
Yeah, and equality was mentioned, and that's missing as well. But back to what Warren was asking, what can be taken by the guy that's come off the streets and finds himself almost privileged to be in an institution like that? I think he's gonna have to want it. The guy's going to have to want it, otherwise he's going to take nothing but a sense of entitlement out of it. For me, I was grateful that I went in there. At a point, at the time I was in a really low place, so I needed to be there. That's the way I look at it. But for the guy coming off the street, there are guys, has been on the street for a long time. My concern is that it becomes a way of life. Institutionalized, that's the word I'm looking at. It can happen to guys.
You see, the other thing is, so if you're coming in off the street and you finish your time in rehab, no matter what rehab it is, a lot of the time you got to leave. And I think that's the beauty of breaking the chains. If you don't have a place to go to, you're not leaving. You're not leaving. There's too much investment that went into you in the 90 days. I'm a full believer in the 90 by 90 principle, where 45 days to break old habits, 45 days to develop new habits, and that is a principle that comes out of the program of recovery. You know, so when a guy comes in there, and you obviously again, don't get me wrong, the help is so appreciated when I can see addicts that were broken getting into a treatment center where there is even some semblance of program. But my fear is we need to do skilling, we need to do upskilling, we need to do
reintegration.
Corporates need to come in. We need learnerships. We need accommodation outside of the primary care facility. And that for me is what I think Breaking the Chains has always been about, is to get people around the table and let's join hands and let's see what we could be doing. You know, there's 2 corporates, one Nedbank and Telkom. That's the 2 corporates I know that are involved in substance abuse, that are involved in helping young men and young women that have the next 30 or 40 years to give back to this country, you know. And I'm all for that. So I think for me, we're going to be pushing that agenda over the next few years, where we get civil society involved. We have a responsibility. There are many corporates, there are many individuals that through the unjust system of apartheid have benefited from from the resources of this country. And we don't want to punish people, but we're saying, hey, people, let's make this country work. One of the workforces I believe that can become so dynamic and can set this country on fire is an addict that is clean, that is hungry, that has a desire to live, has a desire to give, has a desire to share.
And is living a life based on spiritual principles and honesty. And I would hire a person in recovery, a recovering addict, as a business owner over anyone else, because the normal guy that you get in for an interview, he might have to be honest. He'll feel good about himself. He might be an honest guy. He might not. For a person in recovery, if they do not live honestly, if we do not live honestly, if we do not live in integrity, that's my life gone. I don't have an option but to live this way. And I think the workforce of addicts is not only a hungry, as you said, Uncle Manny, and not only a motivated workforce, but also people of great integrity and great morals that we learn through this program of recovery when the program is delivered properly. I know for me, 10 months ago, 44 rehabs, like you, Grant, all the luxury ones, all the best ones in the country, in the world, I had no sense of integrity. I had no principles. I went to Breaking the Chains and I learned principles. And those principles today are not just principles of recovery. They're how I treat my mother, how I always like to speak about that beggar at the robot, how I treat my staff, how I treat everyone with whom I interact. And addicts are great people with a program.
I just want to mention, so the what I found was that the society kind of shunted a lot of the guys I'd shared time in the rehab with. They were pushed aside as just common junkies that have no future. A lot of the guys left with that state of mind as well. So just going backwards a little bit, going back to reintegration and skills development, there is nothing like that at the moment in government institutes that I know of. They go back to the same old life, which was heartbreaking. A lot of the guys would start shutting down 2-3 days before they're leaving because they know they have to go get a gun again to protect themselves against the guys that they're running from in the first place. Fortunately, I'm not one of those guys in that position. And then, it just that was my perception of it. And yeah.
Okay, so for me, here's the shout out. What is every single person and what is every corporate doing in ensuring that we take capable people that have lost their way, investing in them, training them, skilling them, employing them, or merely partnering with them in some business initiative, in some co-op, in some structured, focused path that is going to allow that same addict. I know of addicts today. I have a friend, 14 years clean, employs 1,400 people. When he came into recovery, we had to buy him a toothbrush and a face cloth. Today is giving back. And I think maybe we're privileged as addicts because we understand the pain and we understand what suffering is. But then I think also true leadership would look at society and say, what is society's needs? What are the needs that we can fulfill without too much of a hindrance to us, without too much of us having to dig deep into our pockets? Sometimes it's just mentorship.
Teach a man to fish.
And he'll live forever.
So, Grant, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thanks, Warren.
Uncle Manny, there was a lot to talk about, and I think we definitely have to do a follow-up on this sometime. But the message I got from the show is that it's good. There is help being provided, but so much more can be done. And it starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with a show like this where we ask the questions and where we speak out about what more needs to be done. If no one stands up, nothing will be done about it.
Exactly.
So, any shout-outs from your side, Grant?
Just to my family and friends, and the sober house I'm living at. Thanks.
Okay, for me, just for an update to the listeners, we've had the most successful Narcotics Anonymous rally in Lenasia to date. We had 286 people attend, total money dealt with and transferred was 34,000, and a whole lot of literature was bought and distributed, and so we look forward to next year's rally.
Indeed, indeed. Guys, you've been listening to Breaking the Chains Recovery Radio. Thank you all for tuning in. As usual, broadcasting from 27 Boxes in Melville, brandlife.co.za. Please join us next week, and until then, may God bless and keep you.
You're listening to brandlive.co.za.